Part 73. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 754. Shortly after Asano Akira left with Aya, a dozen heavily armed men in black rushed in. However, after seeing the body of the boss on the ground, they stood there for a while, seeming to be waiting for the person who controlled them to issue new instructions to them. As for Kaylan, who was standing aside, these men in black completely ignored him. Kaylan also didn't pay attention to these men in black. The order they received was most likely to silence boss, but now boss has self-destruct. From a certain perspective, their mission has been completed. Kaylan walked directly to the man in black closest to the door and snatched the light machine gun from his hand. The other man just looked at him blankly and did not make any reaction. The self-awareness of these people is most likely the same as the living CPU of the mass-produced fallen angel. In a semi-awake and semi-sleeping state, people in this state are best controlled, just like puppets on strings. Although there is a high probability that these men in black have control chips implanted in their heads, the instructions they received have probably been transferred to countless hands, and there are countless anti-tracing methods added in between. If you want to rely on these people to catch them, the man behind it was all in vain. Kaylan didn't know whether this operation was a success or a failure. If it was a failure, they destroyed the den of a remnant of a heretical sect, found out the ins and outs of the attack, killed the apparent leader of the group, and he also obtained a large amount of information. But if he was successful, he failed to find any clues about the real mastermind. The mole, or rather, the group of moles, stood in front of the crew so openly. Among the members of the association, Kaylan had no choice. He knew the mole was among them, but he didn't know who it was. If these were just a group of ordinary people, the worst-case scenario would be to arrest them all, but this group of people happened to be at the pinnacle of power in the entire human society, and what left Kaylan speechless the most was that he was still one of them. If you want to find out who the mole is, you must mobilize all members to vote, but a similar vote has been held before, because of the intervention of the mysterious fool, Demeter, and the others failed in the end. As expected. Actually, they could have refused to let me join the crew from the beginning. The result of this vote would be 100% sure, unless they knew from the start that the fool would vote against it. One more question: why did several members, including Afterota, vote in favor of my decision to join the undead crew, but then voted against the subsequent decision to share information? If these people are moles, then these moles probably don't want to see me join the undead crew. It only means that they have other ulterior secrets. That's why they oppose that resolution. But we can't rule out a possibility. The inner ghost wants me to join the undead crew club and use me to achieve a certain purpose. Perhaps killing Pan is to balance the two camps after I join the crew club. The number of votes. Then it seems that Aphrodite seems very suspicious. She was the only person in the opposite camp who came to contact me after the voting ceremony, and guided me to check out the mission of the 776 Special Forces team file. What is her purpose in doing this? Is it to give me some hint, or to make me misunderstand something? She also said that among all the members of the immortal crew, I am the one who has been most severely corrupted by him, but those guys who are less serious than me need to lie in the coffin of eternal life, but I can be as free as a normal person. Activity: is this because I am a symbiote? In this case, why is she unwilling to reveal more information to me? Is she afraid that my erosion will deepen? But if I watch the Mutuo video and look directly at Alpha Man through Collins's perspective, won't it deepen the erosion? Also, according to what they said, the memory fragments that pop up in my mind from time to time are equivalent to the sparks splashed on the big barrel of explosives one after another. God knows when an inconspicuous spark will become it will detonate the entire barrel of explosives. There is another question, that is, how will the undead crew detect the degree of a person's corruption? The real world is not a video game, and there will be no icons or progress bars above the head of a character with a negative buff. Could it be? Do they have some kind of instrument that can test the degree of erosion of the human body at any time, like measuring blood oxygen saturation? Kaylan carried the machine gun and walked deeper underground while thinking about the questions that popped up in his head one after another. The tremors on the ground became more and more intense, and the thing under the ground seemed to be about to escape at any time. Kaylan didn't intend to kill the fusion. All he had to do was hold the thing back for half an hour. After Aya's men had evacuated the people in the neighborhood, he directly summoned the warship to bombard it with its plasma main gun. According to what the instructor said, Kaylan quickly found a hidden switch on a wall that seemed to be a dead end. After pushing the hollow brick in, the entire wall slowly lowered. At the same time, a long row of emergency lights came on at the top of the rear passage. Through the dark red light, you can see that there is a large cage made of transparent material at the end of the passage. A twisted creature is locked in the cage and is constantly hitting the top and four walls of the cage. I don't know what this transparent material is, but in short, its hardness and toughness are very good. Such a violent impact only caused a few fine cracks to appear inside the cage wall, but it was still far from the entire cage being shattered. After Kaylan got closer, he discovered that the wall of the cage was actually 6 meters thick and had a multi-layered structure. As for the strength, it was probably given by the internal stress of the material, just like the hackers in the hijacking incident. Like the black mummy summoned by the cardinal. The principle is actually the same as that of common tempered glass. Although the strength is very high, as long as a gap is broken, the internal stress will not only collapse instantly, but also explode the material itself. The bottom of the transparent cage has been covered with a layer of debris like broken glass, which was obviously the broken cage walls. There are still 14 layers of cage walls left, so we should be able to hold on for a while. After confirming that this thing wouldn't be able to break through the cage for a while, Kaylan focused on the monster. This is Fusion Plus. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 755. The first time he saw this monster, a term from ancient Greek mythology popped into Ian's mind. Chimera. In mythology, this is a monster that is a chimera of lions, goats, and pythons. Later, this word was also used to describe those weird hybrid creatures or chimeras. Of course, it was only limited to the fictional magical worldview. Among the monster in front of him was even more chimera than the ancestor chimera. The limbs of various earth creatures and indigenous creatures of Alpha Planet were randomly pieced together to form a huge monster. At the top of its body, it was a female head with wheat-colored skin and long, messy white hair. Although the appearance of this head had undergone earth-shaking changes, Kaylan still recognized this face as that of the founder of the New Star Chamber of Commerce, the one named Camilla. Claudia's woman. Regardless of whether this woman is a member of a heretical sect or not, it is obvious that she has been fed to this monster by the boss for a long time. But what worries Kaylan the most is not this. The body surface of this fusion body is densely covered with a layer of white fluff. These are not the hairs of the fusion body, but the hyphae of the mimetic fungus, the fusion body. Every time it hits the cage wall, a large number of spores will scatter from between the hyphae and fall to the ground. It seems that these people want to try to fuse the mimetic fungus with the fusion body, but it seems that the mimetic fungus is just parasitic on the surface of the fusion body. I just don't know what this monster looks like inside, Kaylan muttered quietly, not to mention that guy Ivan. Even Kaylan had the urge to dissect this thing. But one thing is certain, the mimic fungus on this fusion body is somehow related to the mimic fungus in Boss. After the death of the latter, the fusion body began to hit the cage crazily, and in this before, it had been in a very quiet state. Is it possible that this thing can also be used as a communication device? A strange idea came to Ian's head. Another cage wall was shattered, and less than 20 seconds had passed since the previous cage wall was shattered. There are still 12 layers of cage walls left, which means that this cage can buy Kaylan and the others at most 4 minutes. In fact, As long as this monster is willing, it can rush out at any time. This beautiful transparent cage cannot trap it at all. It seems that the boss should have the means to control the fusion body. It's a pity that he is dead. Hello? Aya. How is the evacuation of the people going? Kaylan pressed the communicator hanging on the ear and asked. The garrison has entered the economic development zone, but the previous gunfire and the sudden appearance of the army triggered a new commotion. At least, it will take at least 45 minutes. I can only give you half an hour at most, Kaylan said. It's impossible to evacuate all the people in half an hour, Aya hissed. The background noise on her side was extremely chaotic, with all kinds of sirens and shouts. There are still many people hiding in the building. They are unwilling to cooperate with us, and some people have locked the door directly. 45 minutes is still the time required under the best circumstances. In fact, even if there is one, we can't evacuate all the people even if it's an hour, Aya added. 4 more minutes. With a loud bang, another layer of transparent cage walls shattered to the ground. Okay, now it's 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and there's another 3 minutes and 4 seconds. In 10 seconds, this big guy will be out of trouble. But stop it. To be honest, I don't think I can help you hold this thing for a whole hour, Kaylan sighed. It's only 30 minutes, not even one more second. Just use the high-power speaker to tell to all citizens, this block will be hit by indiscriminate artillery fire in 30 minutes. Everyone should immediately follow the military's guidance and evacuate the area in an orderly manner. Those who stay will be responsible for the consequences. This will cause panic. There will probably be a large-scale stampede, Aya exclaimed. What about the army? Do they live for a living? There are too many people. There are too many people in this neighborhood. Even if we count the soldiers of the 24th Regiment, we can't put everyone and everywhere under control, Aya replied. But if we don't do this, more people will die, Kaylan said. We have no choice. As for the agents and soldiers, they only need to be responsible for maintaining order at major intersections. If someone disrupts order and does not obey guide and allow soldiers to use non-lethal weapons, if someone maliciously obstructs evacuation operations, or drives a vehicle to run over people or attack checkpoints, he will be killed directly without reporting it. Kaylan paused for a moment and added, remember, if you can't save everyone, then save as many people as possible, save those who can. I know, I know. Aya gritted her teeth and replied. The cage wall on the 11th floor from the bottom was also shattered. Kaylan noticed that at some point at the front of the fusion body, a cage that was completely wrapped in an exoskeleton, about 2 meters in diameter and 5 meters long, grew out. The front end is round and blunt, and the end is an organ involving a large number of muscles. This thing hits the cage wall again and again, greatly speeding up the appearance of cracks on the cage wall. The time for the penultimate cage wall to be breached was shortened from 20 seconds to 13 seconds. Whether it is in terms of appearance or function, this thing is clearly a battering ram. Kaylan frowned and whispered to himself. Could it be that the remnants of the heretical sect also fed this monster a battering ram? But the fusion should not only regard non-living things as food, right? Moreover, the battering ram doesn't have the genetic sequence for its reproduction. Kaylan began to search in his mind for creatures with organs that resembled a battering ram, but no matter which one they were completely different from the organ growing on the monster in front of him. Moreover, this organ only appeared not long ago. During this time, no one should have come to feed this fusion body. Could this be adaptive evolution? Because you need to break open the cage, you piece together the complex genetic sequences in your body to create such an organ that looks like a battering ram? If this is the case, then this monster will be difficult to deal with. It's like playing cards. Every piece of feed it eats and every set of genes it fuses are equivalent to incomplete cards. What card did Kaylan think it got? You can only play any cards, but now, this fusion seems to be able to rearrange and combine the cards, and then play them into the required deck. As long as you collect enough cards, you can even make more than a dozen decks. It's not a problem for Wang Zhao to come. Of course, this is not a problem for the fusion body, but for Kailan, it is a big problem. To exaggerate, this monster has almost infinite possibilities. The 9th floor from the bottom, the 8th floor from the bottom, the 7th floor from the bottom, the speed at which the cage wall was breached could be described as overwhelming. Kailan even felt that he could smell the fishy smell emanating from this monster. Let alone 30 minutes, he felt that he might not even be able to hold off for 5 minutes. If the living armor is still there may be a chance, but now. Kailan looked at the engineer shovel in his hand and the light machine gun he snatched from the man in black, and then at the fusion body that was more than 20 meters high. Reason told him to turn around and escape from this place immediately. Is the most correct choice. Do you want me to hit the king bomb at the beginning? Ian's hand subconsciously reached into his pocket and held the 2 syringes, but the problem is, I only have this king bomb, and this big guy his hands are full of king bombs. My only chance of winning is to strike a fatal blow before the opponent finishes playing all their cards. But the question has returned to its original point, can these 2 seed embryos really be considered kings? Kailan couldn't help but think of the mimetic crisis that almost completely destroyed the entire institute. The cause was that Professor Smith tried to inoculate cells from the seed of corrosion into his own clone tissue, and inadvertently created seraph-like monster. Now, the seed embryo is equivalent to the ultimate enhanced patch version of the erosion seed cell, and the self transformed by the living armor is much stronger than a lump of meat that cannot survive without the nutrient solution. If these 2 things are combined. Kailan had no doubt that he would gain extremely powerful power, but he was more worried about whether his consciousness could remain awake after being injected with the original seed embryo. According to the instructor of the heretical sex remnant party, the container after being parasitized by the seed embryo will fall into a violent period of unconsciousness. If he becomes like that by then, I am afraid he will soon be destroyed. Should the members of the Immortal Crew Club be eliminated? But at the same time, another voice in his mind kept telling him, inject it quickly, don't hesitate anymore. This is the crystallization of Alpha civilization's tens of thousands of years of technology, embodying the supremacy of Alpha civilization's biological science. The dazzling fruit, as long as you fuse it, you can gain power that rivals the gods. Rivaling the gods. Isn't it the prophet's obsession to match the gods? Why would I want to rival gods? Could this be a sign of consciousness being deeply eroded by him? Kailan shuddered suddenly and loosened his grip on the syringe slightly. He couldn't help but feel a little scared. Just now, what he was thinking about was not whether to inject this thing, but how to deal with side effects if there were any side effects after the injection. This showed that his mind had been extremely seriously affected. Influence. Before you are sure whether this thing is really effective, it is undoubtedly a dangerous item. Even if you want to use this kind of thing, you should only use it when you are desperate. But now, all Kailan has to do is hold this fusion body for 30 minutes instead of being forced into a desperate situation by this fusion body. If that doesn't work, he can rely on the speed of a high-level cybernetic to quickly escape from this place, and then call for battleship artillery fire. Although doing so will cause tens of thousands of civilian casualties, it is at least better than triggering another mimetic crisis, okay? Why do I think this way? Kailan was breathing heavily, his eyes fixed on the fusion body dozens of meters away. At this time, only the last 3 layers of the transparent cage wall were left, and this monster would break out at any time. Boom! 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 The sound of the fusion body hitting the cage wall was like beating a giant drum. Kailan felt his brain go numb, and a strange high temperature spread along his limbs and bones. His consciousness, which had just been clear for a moment, suddenly became chaotic. His ability to think for himself seemed to be gradually losing. He felt as if another consciousness emerged from the depths of his memory and took over this body. The voice no longer induced him to inject the original seed embryo, but kept chanting something in the language of Alpha civilization. Those words were very familiar to Kaylan, but when each syllable was connected together, they turned into words that he couldn't understand at all. He felt that his self-awareness was being stripped away from this body, and darkness gradually fell. At this moment, Kaylan heard a low sigh. Everything returns to normal instantly. What happened? If he had to describe what he felt just now, Kaylan felt as if his soul had left his body for a few seconds and then been stuffed back into this body. He stretched out his hand to wipe his face. There were fine beads of sweat on his forehead, cheeks, and neck, and the skin on his body was horribly hot. As if he suddenly remembered something, he took out his other hand from his pocket. Kaylan suddenly discovered that the hard shell of the syringe had been crushed with his hands. As for the original seeds inside, the embryo seeped into his body from his palm. His eyes couldn't help but widen slightly, and he didn't even notice that the fusion body not far away finally broke the last layer of barrier. But, it seems, there is no reaction. Kaylan turned the palm over and looked at it several times, but found nothing unusual. Even the abnormally elevated body temperature just now subsided. Kaylan raised his head and bumped into a face with wheat-colored skin. The fusion body stopped in front of him, and the head that originally belonged to Camilla Claudia bent down, staring directly at Kaylan. Kaylan stared at the pair of cloudy eyes, and a somewhat absurd idea came to his mind. This Camilla, doesn't she still retain her self-awareness and memories of her life? Just when Kaylan decided to try to have a conversation with the other party, Camilla spoke first. You are the same kind. P.S. Thanks to Cease for the 1,500 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 756. Similar. Kaylan was slightly startled. Could it be that because he absorbed the original embryo of the seed, in the eyes of this fusion body, he was already its kind? So, it didn't attack itself? Kaylan couldn't help but think of the scene he saw in the Abyss hatchery. A large number of fusion embryos curled up inside the fleshy cysts called eggshells, and the swollen hatching bed slowly moved with the flow of sea water. Swinging, the big guy dormant in the deepest part of the abyss silently guarded these larvae that had not yet broken out of their shells, and did not devour them. So, the fusion body will not kill its own heirs? As for the original seed embryo obtained by the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce, it was most likely extracted from the fusion plus in front of me, so, in a sense, I am now its heir? Then, do I still have to call Mom? Although there is an old saying that a mountain cannot tolerate two tigers, there is also an old saying that a tiger's poison cannot eat its seeds. If there is such a relationship, I should be considered safe for the time being, right? Just as Kaylan was thinking this, a dozen tentacles covered with white fluffy hyphae hung down from directly above, shrouding Kaylan's entire body. The face that originally belonged to Camilla Claudia slowly opened her mouth, and said intermittently in a somewhat vague voice, same kind, rich in nutrients, high-quality nutrients, thirsty for, devoured. Kaylan's heart suddenly started beating wildly. Guessed wrong. Totally wrong. The reason why the fusion body in Haiwan hatchery did not swallow those embryos was entirely because the genetic information contained in those embryos was pitiful, and after swallowing it would not be of much help to itself, but those fusions that grew up it's different with larvae. This is like fishermen on Earth fishing. They never use fishing nets with meshes that are too small, just to keep the fry that have not grown up. Kaylan did not see the second adult fusion in the Haiwan hatchery. It was not because those fusion larvae left there after they became adults, but because they were all eaten by the big guy. Rather than saying it was a hatchery, it would be more appropriate to say it was a goo cup. Just like cultivating poison, the fusions devoured each other and merged with each other. Finally, the most powerful super monster with the most complicated genetic sequence was born. Because the genetic information database it holds is extremely large, this super monster has unlimited evolutionary directions. As long as it wants to, it can activate any gene sequence in the body at any time. Such creatures are supposed to devour each other. Only creatures like this can fully utilize the power of the devoured person for their own use. Although it was a bit out of place, Ian's eyes were filled with those inferior web game advertisements with the name of strange beasts from the classic of mountains and seas. Yes, just like those inferior web games, this kind of creature survives in the world. Just for one thing, to devour, fuse, and then evolve. They cannot coexist with other creatures. The original seed embryos implanted in the container are not for the purpose of cultivating new fusion bodies, and their final life and death are irrelevant, because these things are actually high-end ingredients prepared for this big guy. Regardless of whether he has absorbed the 2 original seed embryos or not, in the eyes of this fusion, he is a delicious meal. Ian's left arm swung out behind him without warning. The sharp shovel blade immediately cut off several approaching tentacles, and then he jumped up with all his strength. Generally speaking, jumping up is a very stupid behavior when facing an enemy many times larger than yourself. Because people in the air have nowhere to rely on and cannot change their trajectory, it is easy for the enemy to capture the final landing point, but for Kaylan, this is not the case. He put the stolen light machine gun under his arm, pulled out the rate of fire limiter inserted on the side of the gun with a flick of his finger, and then pulled the trigger all the way. The machine gun suddenly let out a continuous roar like a loom. The huge recoil pushed Kaylan in mid-air to retreat rapidly, and in the blink of an eye he was out of the attack range of the tentacles that were catching up. But when Kaylan landed, the machine gun was completely useless. After removing the limiter, the gun could empty a 100-round bullet chain in just 1 second. This rate of fire was history. The maximum rate of fire of the famous MG-42 machine gun is more than 4 times, almost the same as the live-fire phalanx close-in defense gun equipped on the battleship, but the price is that while tearing apart the enemy, it also tears apart its own gun bore. Kaylan thrust the crimson deformed barrel directly towards a tentacle coming from the side. The high temperature immediately caused a black carbonized layer to form on the surface of the white mycelium, but the tentacle's offensive was not blocked by this. The barrel of the gun was twisted into a ball of twists and rolled towards Kaylan. Damn it! Kaylan cursed fiercely, let go of the gun butt in his hand, stepped back, and hit the poured concrete floor with his tentacles, creating a shallow pit of nearly half a meter. This thing seems to be targeting me, then as long as I can lead it to circle around here, maybe I can buy Aya and the others 30 minutes to evacuate, but the problem is, I can hold on for 30 minutes, Kaylan quickly weighed countermeasures in his mind. The basement of Xinxing Chamber of Commerce is very large, and the various passages are intricate, just like a maze. If the other party is just an ordinary monster, he might be able to take it around. Maze, but with the power of the fusion body, I'm afraid it won't choose to go through the passages built by humans. In its eyes, these walls are almost like paper. There is no way to stop it from moving forward. It will only choose the shortest path to pursue Kaylan. If there is a wall blocking the way, it will directly knock down the wall. If Kaylan runs away, on the upper level, just lift off the ground. In this pursuit mode, the entire Xinxing Chamber of Commerce building will collapse in less than 5 minutes. When this guy emerges from the ruins and spreads the spores of the mimic fungus around, then everything will be over. Kaylan quickly retreated while observing the changes in the fusion body. At the same time, he was observing his own body. He had absorbed the original seed embryo, and he had absorbed a dose for 2 people at once. However, none of the reaction symptoms described by the captured instructor appeared on Kaylan. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen Mi San. Chapter 757. Although the captured instructor also said that after injecting the original seed embryo, there will still be about 5 minutes of wakefulness, but before falling into the violent period, he will suffer from general weakness, hot and cold, and headache. Symptoms such as dizziness and dizziness, these are all normal rejection reactions. If you survive it and take in sufficient nutrients, the vaccinated person will become a container for seeds. If he doesn't survive it, his body's organs will fail, his skin will ulcerate, and he will die. But apart from the extremely short-term abnormal fever in his body, Kaylan was just like a normal person, and he didn't feel like he was going to faint at any time. Those two instructors took, could it be Zibe goods? Bang! Another tentacle passed through the wall and headed straight for Kaylan. The diameter of this tentacle was enough for a person to hug it. It could not be cut with an engineer's shovel, so Kaylan could only continue to run away. I don't know if it's the original seed embryo or the fusion's powerful perception. No matter where in the basement Kaylan runs to, no matter how many walls are between him and the fusion, the other party can pinpoint his position and launch an attack. The tentacle twisted like a python and chased after him. During the pursuit, several human arms grew out of the tentacle and grabbed Kaylan. Can this guy change his body at any time? Because the sudden appearance of the arm extended the attack distance of the tentacle, the hood of Ian's hoodie was caught, and he tore open the zipper, retracted his arms, and a golden cicada emerged from its shell. The abandoned hoodie was instantly swallowed by a huge mouth growing out of the tentacles, and then quickly spat out, but the fabric had already been riddled with holes by the strong acidic digestive juices. Completely I can no longer see the original appearance. But the next second, the changes in the fusion body almost shocked Ian's jaw. I saw a large amount of dark red, plasma-like liquid secreted from the mucous membrane on the surface of the tentacles, quickly wrapping the entire tentacles inside, hardening, forming a layer of armor like a blood scab. Living armor. Kaylan only felt a numbness on his scalp. The hoodie that the fusion just swallowed was not because it couldn't tell the difference between food and clothes. Its target was not that piece of clothing in the first place, but what was stuck to the clothes. Hair and skin debris with Kellen genes. Unique, excellent, genes, superior, top nutrients. Devouring, can, become stronger, obtain, power, fusion. The whisper of the fusion body was in this underground space. Echoing, although the sentence is incomplete, everyone can hear the uncontrollable excitement in the tone. Why can this guy even simulate living armor? Kaylan thought as he ran away. Logically speaking, the living armor has been peeled off from his body. Could it be that the living armor still left some information fragments behind? Was it captured by the fusion body in its own genes? If it's just information fragments, then the living armor simulated by the fusion body should not be a complete living armor. This thing is just superficial. Kaylan looked back, and sure enough, although the hardened blood scab enhanced the defense of the tentacles, it also severely hindered the tentacles' ability to move. The genuine living armor can follow the movements of the body's joints and muscles at any time. What changes is that it is not in a solid state, but can be transformed into a liquid or semi-fluid state at any time to perfectly fit the host's body. But the living armor simulated by the fusion body is just a layer of solidified blood scab. When the tentacles bend or twist, the blood scabs covering it will collapse and peel off. After a while, the blood scabs that originally covered the entire tentacles will only less than 1/3 of the blood scab was left. The fusion body also realized that this evolution was a failure and imperfect. It simply stopped secreting the blood, and instead spawned more arms, trying to catch the fleeing Kaylan. These arms are constantly extending forward based on tentacles. Many of the arms have not even grown completely. The incomplete muscles and fascia are wrapped around the white bones. 5 bloody fingers are grasping crazily. Kaylanjit felt that it was longing for everything from itself, even if it couldn't catch itself immediately, as long as it could rip off a few hairs and a piece of flesh from itself. it wanted to rely on Ian's flesh, blood, and genes. Alleviate this craving while filling its unquenchable craving for food and nutrients. If we continue like this, the Chamber of Commerce building will soon collapse. Kaylan turned around and slapped a hand that was grabbing his shoulder with the engineer's shovel. The skin and flesh on that hand was instantly cut off by the sharp edge of the engineer's shovel, but the bones inside were made of nano-alloy. The engineer's shovel opened a small hole. This kind of bone strength is obviously not something humans can possess, not even high-level enhanced humans. It may be possible to transform humans to this extent, but only if the entire body's skeleton is made of pure nano-alloy. These arms are not pure human limbs. Although they look exactly like human arms, their material has been replaced by fusion bodies with other things. The main component of these bones is no longer calcium, but a substance with a hardness comparable to nano-alloy. Perhaps because it has copied multiple human brains, this fusion's IQ is not low. It knows how to take advantage of its own advantages and make full use of the complex genes it has absorbed. It seems to be to verify Ian's with this thought. After he slapped this hand away, several bulging glands suddenly grew out of the palms of the other hands and began to spray a white liquid towards Kaylan. This white liquid solidified instantly as soon as it came into contact with the air, forming a tough thread. Although Kaylan himself was not hit by these threads, he clearly saw a thread sticking to the wall and forcefully coming out of the wall. A 1-meter square cement block was pulled down, and another wall that was hit by 4 spider threads was completely pulled down. Through the paused image, Kaylan could see clearly that these spider threads were not stuck to the surface of the wall, but penetrated directly into the wall, like arrows flying at high speed. Its stickiness, strength, and toughness cannot be measured by normal standards. This ability to spin silk should obviously come from some kind of indigenous insect creature, most likely a ghost spider or a dragon hunter spider. The former's silk is extremely tough and is often used in some cables or on the armor. 1 kilogram of ghost web spider silk can even be sold for a high price of 500,000 credits on the black market. As for the latter, this kind of spider never builds a web, but uses the spider silk as a shooting weapon, and the power of the spray is it can even penetrate the chitinous carapace of the ultralisk. Of course, it is not ruled out that the spider silk ejected by the fusion body has the characteristics of both. Maybe it also contains deadly biological toxins. Aya, Kaylan yelled in the communication channel, how long do you want? I'm being chased away by that thing now. That trump card is of no use at all. I'm afraid I can't delay it for you too much time. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 758. Only 1/3 of the people have evacuated this neighborhood. Aya's voice rang in Ian's ears. There are remnants of the heretical sect who have mixed into the crowd, and the garrison has had many encounters with them. Small-scale firefight. Although these remnants have been killed, at least 20 civilians were accidentally injured and killed in the firefight. The subsequent stampede casualties caused by the riots cannot yet be counted. It is conservatively estimated, death there may be more than 200 people. I can't control that much anymore. Evacuate as many people as you can. Ask the nearby garrison to bring me all the vehicles that can transport people. If civilian agencies have near-Earth aircraft, all of them will be mobilized. Kaylan lowered his head and dodged a spider thread that almost grazed the tip of his hair. He continued to yell at the communication device, the building of the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce will collapse soon. If this fusion, if the body is exposed to an unenclosed environment, no one in this neighborhood can survive. Why, Aya was obviously stunned for a moment. With the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce as the center, the 3 surrounding streets have been cleared. Even if the monsters rush out, there should be no casualties among the people. This monster is covered with hyphae that mimic fungi. These man-eating fungal spores can be sprayed up to 10 kilometers away. As long as there is the slightest contact, it will be parasitized. No one will be spared by then, Kaylan shouted hoarsely explained. even with his 9th level enhanced physical fitness, under such a high-intensity pursuit and escape, he would inevitably be on the verge of reaching the limit. Moreover, he also had to use time stop frequently to observe the attack methods of the fusion body. Planning the movement route, this is simply a double test of his physical and mental strength. How much time is left until the building collapses? Aya asked urgently on the communication channel. At most, it won't take more than 3 minutes. Kaylan quickly looked around the situation in the basement. Many walls and partitions had been destroyed and knocked down by the fusion body, including many load-bearing walls with steel piles inside. The ceiling of the basement part has broken and fallen, and the entire building has begun to tilt downward and settle. Kaylan was not worried that he would be buried alive by the collapsed building. With his ability, it was not difficult to open a passage in the ruins. However, it is not difficult for him, and it is naturally even easier for the fusion body. Ark Guards Fleet. I am the 5th seat of the Immortal Crew Association, the Pope. Have you done what I just asked you to do? Kaylan closed the team communication and switched to another channel. Reporting to His Excellency Pope, the cruiser Starfire has arrived at the designated area, the main gun has been charged, and has locked the target area and is ready to launch at any time, a sonorous and powerful voice replied in the communication channel. Ark South Area Defense Module. The air defense shields number 167 to number 181 have all been closed. The hull dome has been opened, and the bombardment orbital airspace has been cleared, another voice responded. If Kaylan could run to the street outside at this time, he would see that the giant spherical screen above his head that was used to simulate the sky had been closed, and the thick dome was lifted toward the surroundings, revealing the real sky above Alpha Star. Unlike the cloudless clear sky simulated on the screen, the sky above Alpha Star is always covered by a layer of lead gray clouds. The sun cannot be seen clearly during the day and the stars cannot be captured at night. No one would like a sky like this, lifeless, just like the wasteland after the end of the world, lifeless. A cruiser several hundred meters long was hovering 12,000 meters directly above the South 5th District. The figure of the cruiser was obscured by clouds, and the people could not see it even if they raised their heads, but at this moment, the cruiser's main gun muzzle has been aimed at the headquarters building of the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce below, and the plasma cannon's charging array continuously flashed through circles of blue-white arcs. This shot was enough to turn the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce building and the fusion body into ashes, and it was also enough to raise the ground temperature of the entire block by hundreds to thousands of degrees. The air temperature will be heated to more than 300 degrees Celsius, and the moisture in it will be quickly evaporated. People in this neighborhood will be cooked in just a few seconds like food stuffed into an oven. Cooked, dried. This temperature is not high enough to incinerate the human body, but it is high enough to take away tens of thousands of lives in a very short period of time. If an artillery fire is ordered at this time, it will be equivalent to reenacting a small-scale Alexander disaster. But if the cannon is not fired and the fusion is allowed to rush out of the Nova Chamber of Commerce building and spray the spores of the mimetic fungus into the surrounding neighborhoods, then the situation will only get worse. By then, the death toll may be more than just tens of thousands. Another load-bearing wall made of high-strength concrete and solid metal piles was flattened by the tentacles of the fusion body. Those 6-meter-long metal piles with a diameter of about a handful and a large number of concrete fragments remaining on the surface were directly hit by the tentacles. Roll it up and keep shooting towards Kaylan like throwing spears. A corner of the basement has completely sunk to the bottom. Thanks to the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce building being transformed into a fortress by the remnants of this heretical sect, if it had been any other building, it would have completely collapsed by now. The northeast corner of the building has overturned. After losing the load-bearing part, the floor above was overwhelmed and was directly crushed. Rooms on 3 or 4 floors were squeezed together and fell to the foundation with a loud rumbling sound. If this picture is a bit difficult to imagine, you can imagine what a house made of plasticine and cardboard would look like if someone sat on it and flattened one corner, The walls, floors, interior decoration, and furniture, all it seems to have been compressed, and it is even difficult to distinguish the original dividing lines between the various floors when looking from the side. Part of the collapsed area can even see outside light coming in. If the fusion body destroys a few more load-bearing walls, it is estimated that the remaining part of the building will completely sink into the foundation. This building is the last barrier to those deadly spores. Wait, barrier. Kaylan suddenly had an idea in his mind. If a building like a building can become a barrier, then why can't I put a bigger barrier on the outside? Anyway, as long as we can block those flying spores. Now it is definitely too late for the engineering department to rush to make a giant physical cover. If an energy shield is used, it might be possible. No, it won't work. Without precise debugging, such a huge energy shield it is impossible to precisely control the scope of action by dropping it directly from the air. Whether it can block the spores is another matter. Once it comes into contact with the hull of the Ark, the neighborhood will also be heated. The degree of heating may not be as terrifying as the heat escaping from the plasma cannon, but the energy shield does not only last for a few seconds before closing. This is a continuous heating process, just like boiling a frog in warm water. Neighborhood temperatures will eventually rise to lethal levels. The frog in the pot had no time to jump out before the water temperature became lethal. As for the kind of barrier wall used when the whole ship is blocked, it can only be found at the connection between the plots, and it is of no use at this time. Buildings may provide cover for people, but the spores of the mimic fungus fall from the sky, and if you want to avoid these spores, you must hide inside the building. In this way, the progress of evacuation will be completely stalled. As for the fusion body, the spores it can produce are almost endless. As long as it is alive, it can keep spraying spores around. If you want to leave this neighborhood, you have to expose yourself to the deadly spores falling from the sky. If you hide in a safe room, you will face the terrifying high temperature and scorching air brought by the plasma cannon bombardment. You can only choose one of the two. No, we have to come up with a better way, and it has to be implemented in a short time. Another spider thread hit Kaylan. Ian's evasive movement was a little slower, and a palm-long opening was cut on the left trouser leg. Fortunately, the leg inside was not injured. The fusion body rarely sprays spider silk directly at Kaylan like it did just now. In this short 10-second chase, it learned to weave the spider silk into a web, and covered Kaylan overwhelmingly. Coupled with the sneak attack of a single spider thread, Kaylan was forced to move, and Kaylan was almost forced into a desperate situation several times. Spider silk, spider web, liquid secretions, condense into a solid state when encountering air. Ian's eyes suddenly lit up and he shouted, "Spark Cruiser! Do you have fire extinguishing gel on your ship?" Fire extinguishing gel is a fireproof and fire extinguishing material commonly used on warships. It is usually stored in a high-pressure metal tank in the form of a mixture of powder and liquid. When used, the sprayed liquid will quickly turn into a liquid after contacting the air. A gel-like flame-retardant substance that expands greatly in volume, and coupled with the dry powder particles contained within it, it has excellent fire-extinguishing capabilities. Since there is no barrier that can block the spray of those spores, then simply use fire-extinguishing gel to spray the whole body of the fusion body, so that the hyphae and spores are coated in this sticky and heavy semi-fluid. In this way, even if the fusion ejects these spores, and they cannot fly very far. Yes. There are 200 cubic meters of a 2-type fire-extinguishing gel and 3,500 cubic meters of B6 type fire-extinguishing gel on board the Spark. In addition, there are 4 tons of raw materials stored in the cargo hold. At least 2,000 cubic meters of B6 type fire-extinguishing gel can be prepared at any time. Gel, the leader of the cruiser Starfire reported immediately. The difference between the 2 types of fire-extinguishing gel, A2 and B6, lies in whether it is destructive to precision electronic components, the former is more expensive and is generally used for fire extinguishing operations in important facilities within the ship, while the latter is mostly used for the exterior of the ship's hull and armor. Some fire incidents. For K-LAN, there is basically no difference between the two. 5,700 cubic meters of gel. K-LAN thought for a moment, at a height of 12,000 meters, can you accurately project these gels to a target with a diameter of about 30 meters? It's difficult, the fire extinguishing gel spray gun is not a weapon, and the longest horizontal range is only 500 meters, although there is no distance limit when spraying from top to bottom, the accuracy cannot be guaranteed, the cruiser replied. Then lower the altitude. Descend to a height that can accurately spray these fire extinguishing gels on the target, K-LAN roared. 5,000 square meters of gel will not last long, so that all the surrounding people equipped with fire extinguishing gel will all airships are coming. My requirement is that after the target is exposed, its body must be wrapped in gel at all times. Yes. The Starfire cruiser began to descend as soon as it received the order. At the same time, the synthesis room in the ship was at full power, and one high-pressure metal tank after another was filled with newly synthesized gel, and then was put on power armor. The soldiers carried it to the bottom without stopping. The Starfire cruiser did not stop until it was only 150 meters away from the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce building. At this time, the cruiser was completely inside the Ark's hull. A huge shadow covered a large block, causing the people to bursts of exclamation. K-LAN. What are you doing? Why do you want the battleship to be lowered? At this time, Aya asked angrily on the communication channel, do you think the public's mood is not panic enough? Shut up. Do your own thing well, K-LAN didn't bother to explain to her. The Xinxing Chamber of Commerce building was in danger and might completely collapse at any time. Big guy, I don't have time to drive around with you anymore. Let's meet on the ground. After K-LAN said these words, he jumped directly to the stairs. Speaking of which, thanks to the fusion's massive destruction, the originally maze-like basement was almost completely destroyed. Except for the collapsed and buried areas, all other passages were unobstructed. It only took K-LAN less than 10 seconds. In no time, he had already rushed to the street outside. Before he could take a breath, a loud noise came from behind. The fusion body's tentacles destroyed the last few load-bearing walls, and the entire building finally collapsed completely. Fire extinguishing gel, get ready, K-LAN raised his hand and shouted loudly. The smoke and dust raised when the building collapsed was nearly 100 meters high, but K-LAN still saw a tentacle penetrate the ruins and emerge from the ground. Shooting. The bottom compartment of the Starfire cruiser was completely open. 16 fire extinguishing gel guns were clamped by the mechanical arms and aimed at the ruins directly below. White foam-like gel sprayed out from the muzzles and rushed straight out of the ruins. The fusion body goes away. During the process of fully reacting with the air, the volume of the fire extinguishing gel expanded rapidly. A ball of gel that was originally the size of a fist when it was shot out of the muzzle, when it fell on the ruins, was already large enough to wrap an entire adult in it. This fusion body that had just been seeing the light of day instantly looked like the heroine in the book, with its entire body covered in white, viscous colloid. K-LAN stared closely at the white hyphae on the surface of the fusion body. The spores were indeed sprayed out, but due to the coercion and pull of the gel, these spores could not fly even 10 meters away and fell to the ground, and more spores can't even leave the white hyphae that are stuck together. Seeing this scene, K-LAN couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although the problem of the fusion body has not been completely solved, at least the immediate threat has been resolved. P.S. Thanks to the closed reward for the 1,500 starting coins, thank you to Sahara Scorpion for the 500 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen Mi San. Chapter 759. Although the fusion body has been struggling fiercely, the fire-extinguishing gel poured down on its head and face, covered it and the entire ruins of the building. Kaylan took a run and jumped directly to a sentry box on the street. As soon as he stood firm, the gel that came over him had already half-submerged the sentry box. Fortunately, this sentry box is a semi-permanent building built directly on the foundation. If it had been a temporary hut built with foam plastic steel plates, it would have been destroyed by the gel by this time. In addition to the Starfire cruiser, several engineering ships used for rescue and repair operations appeared in the sky above the neighborhood. These airships have greater reserves of fire-extinguishing gel and launchers than the Starfire. The Battleship No. 1 cruiser is too powerful. After all, this is the job of these logistics support airships. A large amount of fire-extinguishing gel poured down from the sky as if it was free. The waist of the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce and several surrounding streets had been filled with gel. The gel flowing everywhere directly broke down the roadblocks set up by the army and began to move towards them. Spreading further afield, Kaylan took out a pistol, shot a hook to the roof of the department store across the street, and then used the power wheels to slide directly up. The roof of this department store was almost the highest in the block. Click on it. Standing in this position, you can easily overlook the overall situation. The fusion body seemed to be temporarily trapped by the fire-extinguishing gel, and had no intention of hunting and evacuating the people. It seemed that it had even given up its pursuit of Kaylan for the time being. Kaylan turned his attention to the other end again. The overflowing fire-extinguishing gel was spreading rapidly. The small post box where he had just stopped briefly had been completely covered, and the part below the second floor of the department store was completely fallen. He calculated in his mind that at the current rate of spread, Aya and the others would be able to evacuate most of the people in the block before the fire-extinguishing gel flooded the entire block. Of course, that's assuming no one is causing trouble. 4.5 kilometers away from Xinxing Chamber of Commerce, checkpoint number 6. This is a small road with a width of only about 10 meters. Compared with the number 1 and number 2 checkpoints with the largest flow of people, the number of people passing through here is not large. However, it is precisely because the opening is small that the degree of congestion is the same. The big roads don't make much difference either. There were several hover cars with smashed windshields stacked on one side of the road. At the beginning of the riot, someone tried to force their way in, but Ian's kill order had just been issued at that time, and these vehicles, the owner of the car was shot dead by a sniper before he could reach the bayonet. However, even so, the number of innocent passers-by killed and injured by these cars along the way exceeded double digits. The brands and configurations of these air-cushioned cars are quite luxurious. Among them is a limited edition Rolls-Royce with the rose gold Flying Goddess logo. Obviously, the owners of these cars are either rich or expensive. From their perspective, their own lives are definitely much more important than the ordinary people crowded on the road. In their opinion, even if they killed a few people, as long as they could leave this place alive, they could settle this trivial matter by spending some money and using their own network resources. However, they never expected to encounter such a group of stupid heads. Without even firing a warning shot, they fired directly at people without saying a word. The owners of these hover vehicles could not believe until their death that these soldiers actually dared to shoot at themselves. To blame, it can only be blamed on the person who issued this order, Kaylan. If it were the army chief as the decision-maker, or even a congressman handling this matter, he would have to think twice after shooting at these people, but Kaylan wouldn't care about this. In the eyes of the Immortal Crew Association, the so-called rich and nobles are not much different from ordinary civilians. Don't tell me how glorious your family's history is, and don't tell me how huge resources, important technologies, and production lines you have in your hands. No one can be replaced, especially someone like this. People who know how to exploit ordinary workers, engage in internal strife with fellow companies, and rely on their own power to think highly of themselves, this kind of person will not be of any help to the development of society and science. The reason why the Immortal Crew Association keeps this group of people is purely for the convenience of management, but when their behavior crosses the line in any way, the Crew Association will not have any concerns at all when dealing with these people. Kill a group of powerful people and build up another group. The autocratic kings of the old era still had to consider the balance of power among the various parties in the court, but the crew members did not. With control over all violent institutions, cutting-edge technology, and survival resources, they have absolute and supreme power. Several soldiers wearing power armor pushed these luxury cars to the side of the road and stacked them up like stacks of arhuts. When they were a little surprised, shooting the perpetrators who drove into people not only did not trigger public riots, on the contrary, some people took the initiative to stand up and spontaneously began to maintain order at the checkpoint. A soldier in charge of pulling the cordon even heard the conversation between a man and a woman in line. "Did I see that car just now? It seems to be the boss's car," a woman wearing an office skirt, long hair disheveled, barefoot and holding high heels in her hands whispered in surprise. "That's right, NAN 488888. This license plate is the one I queued for 2 days and 2 nights in NAN 4 district 2 years ago to help him get the auction qualification." The man's mood was a little excited. "I just saw it clearly." "Oh, it's the fat pig himself who's driving, not his driver." Then, the boss was beaten to death by the garrison. The woman covered her mouth in surprise. "Although my view was blocked by the crowd when the soldiers pulled the body out just now, it should be him. When the car hit me, I could see clearly. He was the only one sitting in the car. There was no mistaking it." "All right," the man said as he hugged the woman and took advantage of the situation. The woman did not resist, and the two seemed to be in a relationship. "The boss is dead. What will happen to the company, and our jobs in the future?" The woman leaned on the man's arms and asked worriedly. "We'll talk about the future later. Anyway, I don't want to stay in this company anymore." There was a hint of disgust in the man's tone. "This damn fat pig just wants to squeeze us, and he likes to use the old era Jack Ma saying all day long. Words should be taken as facts. The phrase 996 is the blessing you earned in your previous life makes me want to vomit. What else? It is a good thing for young people to suffer some losses. They should think more about the company and don't think about it all day long. Damn it, the overtime intensity and harsh systems of those big factories are copied without fail. As a result, the salary level is not even 1/10 of those big factories. This kind of guy, I just want to say, die well." Speaking of which, the boss seems to have sexually harassed the good-looking female colleagues in the office before. When working overtime on weekends, he would often force girls into the office for business training. After she was convinced that her boss was really dead, the woman became bolder and began to complain to her boyfriend about her former boss. "Is this happening? Why didn't I know?" The man was stunned for a moment and asked. "Well, I also heard what my colleagues said." "Then you haven't been bullied by this fat pig, have you?" The man looked at his girlfriend nervously. No, the woman lowered her head and looked at her toes with some guilt. "Really?" The man began to get a little suspicious. Although his girlfriend is not the most beautiful one in the company, she can still be ranked in the top 3, if that dead fat pig is really like what his girlfriend said. If he makes excuses to harass female employees every now and then, there is no reason why he would let his girlfriend go. Just when the guy was thinking about how to ask his girlfriend if he had been raped, a man wearing a wide sweatshirt and a hood suddenly squeezed over and handed over something in his fist. "Here you go," the hooded man whispered. His voice was very hoarse. "What?" The man was stunned for a moment, obviously unable to react. "Give you his gift." The hooded man's movements suddenly accelerated. The man holding his girlfriend realized that the last thing he was holding was a syringe with the needle protective sheath removed, and it was stabbed straight into his neck. "Come over." "What are you doing?" the man yelled immediately, but because he was holding his girlfriend with both hands, he had no chance to push the hooded man away. In desperation, he actually used his girlfriend as a shield. Pushed out. The thick needle of the syringe directly pierced the woman's suit jacket and shirt underneath, and penetrated into the flesh. The hooded man did not hesitate to use his thumb to crush the glass bubble at the end of the syringe. Driven by the compressed air, the inside of the syringe, all the liquid was injected into the woman's body. "What did you inject into my girlfriend?" the man roared in shock and anger, but in the next second, he suddenly found that the body of his girlfriend in his arms began to become extremely hot, and an abnormal blush appeared on his face. Touched her cheek. As for the hooded man, he let out a hee-hee smile, turned around and got into the crowd again. "Asshole! Come back here." The man wanted to catch the hooded man, but at this time, the woman in his arms weakened and was about to fall. He could only hold her tightly. "Bear! What's wrong with you? Why is your body so hot? Is it a fever?" the man asked anxiously. He didn't know what the strange hooded man injected into his girlfriend. But it is obvious that the symptoms that my girlfriend is suddenly experiencing are definitely related to that medicine. As the body temperature of the woman in his arms continued to rise, the man holding her became more and more frightened. Even though they were separated by their clothes, he could still feel his girlfriend's scorching body temperature. He felt as if he was holding her, not a person, but a piece of red-hot charcoal. This metaphor may be a bit exaggerated, but judging from his experience, the problem with his girlfriend's body surface alone is probably already over 70 degrees. How is it possible for a human body temperature to reach 70 degrees? Above 40 degrees is enough to be fatal. 70 degrees, this is absolutely impossible. The man suspected that there was a problem with his sensory organs. He tentatively stretched out a finger and lightly touched his girlfriend's forehead. The next second, he immediately retracted his finger. So hot. It wasn't until this moment that the man realized the importance of the problem. Just when he was about to call the soldiers around to maintain order, his girlfriend's body, which had been limp in his arms, suddenly became stiff and straight. Then, he bit him hard on the neck. The man's scream lasted only a second before it broke off. The woman lying in his arms had bitten his throat. The man's body shrank instantly. As for his woman, my friend, on the other hand, kept eating the flesh and blood on his face like crazy. The people queuing up around finally noticed something unusual here. People screamed and retreated. A 10-meter diameter open space soon appeared among the crowd. And in the center of the open space, a young woman sat on a male corpse, biting and swallowing the pieces of meat and organs torn from the male corpse. "Is this a zombie?" someone in the crowd exclaimed. The surrounding soldiers who were responsible for maintaining order rushed over. The non-commissioned officer leading the team just took one look and raised the gun in his hand without hesitation. A woman suspected of being a container was found attacking civilians at the 6th checkpoint. The 3rd mobile team is preparing to perform a cleanup mission. After saying this to the walkie-talkie, he took out a magazine with a biohazard mark from his waist, replaced it, and then pulled the trigger repeatedly against the woman's back. Bah! 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 Deafening gunshots rang out in the crowd, and 3 shocking blood holes suddenly appeared on the woman's slender back. But what puzzled the sergeant was that with the power of the gun in his hand, even if the person who was shot was the container whose body had been strengthened by the erosion seed, and the kinetic energy carried by the bullet was enough to knock it to the ground. However, this woman seemed to be fine. After being shot 3 times, she only slightly leaned her upper body forward. "Something's wrong, immediately request support from your superiors." As soon as the sergeant finished speaking, the woman turned her head. Her mouth was still chewing the bloody meat, and dark red liquid continued to flow down the corners of her mouth and chin. There was no trace of the white of his eyes at all. Looking into such a pair of eyes, the Master Chief felt that the hairs on his body suddenly stood up. This brief exchange of glances lasted less than half a second before the woman suddenly jumped up from the ground and threw the sergeant standing 5 meters away to the ground at an extremely fast speed. Stab dash. The woman lowered her head and took one big bite, chewing off half of the sergeant's face. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 760. The other soldiers were shocked, but the muscle memory developed through long-term training still allowed them to pick up the weapons in their hands immediately and pull the trigger on this woman without thinking. Different from the semi-automatic shooting used by the sergeant just now, these soldiers all adjusted their weapons to fully automatic mode. At this distance, this level of firepower is enough to smash the human body into a sieve or even a ball of minced meat, but the soldiers were stunned. Yes, the bullet tore the woman's body apart even faster than she could recover herself. Those steel core bullets were squeezed out of the bullet holes by the wildly wriggling and growing granules and spat on the ground. The next moment, the bullet holes that were originally bloody were it has completely disappeared. Restraint equipment. Bring the restraint equipment, a soldier turned his head and shouted to his colleagues in the rear. Get out of the way, all the rest of the gang will retreat. Leave here as far away as possible. 2 soldiers wearing power armor ran over quickly, and their heavy mechanical boots made a muffled bang-bang sound when they fell to the ground. In their hands they held riot-proof steel forks more than 4 meters long, to be precise, they were the military version of riot-proof steel forks. The standard riot-proof steel fork generally used to deal with rioters is 2.2 meters long and is made of high-strength aluminum alloy. The military version is intended for use on strong, rough-skinned, and thick-skinned indigenous creatures in the wilderness. Not only does it increase in length, the cost was more than doubled, and the material was replaced with titanium aluminum steel mixed with 16% nano alloy. This material is also used to make bulletproof armor for aircraft and airships. Although titanium aluminum alloy is already considered a very low-density armor material, the 4-meter-long anti-riot steel fork still weighs nearly 60 kilograms. For non-augmented soldiers, they must be equipped with power armor or only mechanical exoskeletons can use this tool. The restraining claws at the front ends of the 2 military riot-proof steel forks were driven by the hydraulic device and opened up, accurately clamping down on the woman who was lying on the corpse of the sergeant, swallowing the flesh and blood. The 2 soldiers wearing power armor breathed a sigh of relief, but just when they were about to activate the electrode device attached to the riot-proof steel fork to subdue the woman made a move that everyone present could not believe. She raised her hands, grabbed the restraining claws on her body, and then opened the restraining claws little by little. "This is impossible," the soldier holding the anti-riot steel fork exclaimed, "even a container of erosion seeds cannot be so powerful." "Is there something wrong with the restraining claw and it's not locked?" another soldier holding a gun to hold them back asked aloud. "No. It's already locked. If you look carefully, the restraining claws have been deformed, they were broken open by this woman with brute force." The soldier holding the anti-riot steel fork took a deep breath and put on his helmet. His transparent mask was immediately covered with a layer of white mist, which then quickly melted away. "We can't control this guy. Please quickly request support from our superiors." Before she finished speaking, the woman covered in blood had torn off the restraining claws on the front ends of the 2 anti-riot steel forks. Immediately afterwards, she pulled out a leg bone of the dead sergeant and smashed it hard at the soldier wearing power armor and holding a riot-proof steel fork. Boom! The thick leg bone accurately hit the helmet of the power armor. With a loud and crisp sound, the bone broke, and an extremely obvious dent appeared on the helmet of the power armor. Although the soldiers in the armor were not injured, they were stunned by the huge force attached to their bones, and a buzzing sound kept echoing in their ears. Before he could recover from this dizziness, he felt a huge force hit his chest. His whole body and his power armor instantly lost balance, and he fell to the ground on his back with a bang. When the soldier opened his eyes again, he saw the woman's ghost-like face clinging to his mask. Her fingers were covered in blood and filth, and several of them were broken, showing a weird bending angle. She seemed to have lost her sense of pain and kept tapping the mask of the helmet with her fingers. With a teeth-searing sound, fine cracks soon appeared on the mask. Fear continued to ferment in the heart of the soldier. He wanted to get up and lift the woman away, but found that the power armor had lost control at some point. In desperation, he could only turn to the woman. The companion shouted for help, "Help me get her away, she is going to eat me." Another soldier wearing power armor immediately threw away the scrapped anti-riot steel fork in his hand and reached out to grab the woman who was kneeling on top of his companion. But as soon as he grabbed one of the woman's arms, the woman turned around and hugged him with the other arm. Captured the wrist of the powered armor. What does she want? As soon as this idea came out of the soldier's head, an unimaginable force dragged him to the ground, and his right arm was torn off from his torso along with the armor. Within a second, severe pain came belatedly from his shoulder. Ah! He let out a scream, gritted his teeth and started the emergency self-rescue procedure. 2 needles came out from the hidden grooves on the inside of the armor, and injected powerful analgesics and stimulants into the soldier's body. Only then did he feel the heartbreaking pain. Somewhat relieved. Huh. The sweaty soldier raised his head and was shocked to find that the monster had pulled out his severed arm from the armor and held it up. It opened its mouth. Human teeth were actually not suitable for biting flesh, but in the face of the terrifying power, these factors were no longer important. The monster's originally flat abdomen had now become bulging, as if it had been pregnant for 10 months, but even so, its appetite still seemed unsatisfied. It raised its head and looked at the soldier with eyes full of greed and desire. Don't come here." The soldier subconsciously reached out to cover his broken arm, but he knew very well that in the face of the opponent's terrifying power, any resistance would be in vain. He was about to be eaten, just like the leader of the 3rd Mobile Team. He glanced at the corpse of the non-commissioned officer not far away from the corner of his eye. It was a corpse, but there was only a skeleton left. Only some of the muscles and fascia that were difficult to eat still remained on the bones. Everything else, including hair, skin and internal organs, were all eaten by the monster. Note: there is a big difference between the eating methods of the Berserk stage seed container and the fusion body. The container still retains human characteristics. The eating method mainly relies on biting with teeth and swallowing through the digestive tract, but the container's digestive tract is the first to be eaten by the body, one of the organs transformed from seeds. It has extremely strong digestive capabilities. As for the way the fusion eats, it relies on the tentacles to secrete digestive juices to melt the food and then absorb it through the body surface mucosa. This way of eating is more efficient in the utilization of food. So high that not even the bones are left. Help! Who can come and save me? The soldier shouted crazily in his heart. Just when the woman threw herself on him, a gray blade flashed by. The woman's face suddenly froze, and the chisel movement in her hand stopped. The soldier was stunned for a moment, looking back over the woman's shoulder. It was a young man wearing brown sunglasses and holding a long knife. With just a few shakes of his wrist, the monster's body was cut into several pieces, and a large amount of undigested food fell from the monster's belly. It rolled out, and a sour and unpleasant smell suddenly filled the street. Thank you," the soldier looked at the young man holding the knife in shock. He covered his broken arm and struggled to get up from the ground. This young man was wearing casual clothes, but there was a military standard communicator hanging on his ear. Coupled with the terrifying strength and the extremely unpopular weapon in his hand, the soldier who had narrowly escaped death could not help but feel sorry for his savior. The identity aroused curiosity. "Excuse me, are you from the Security Bureau?" He immediately thought of the Security Bureau agents who also participated in this operation. Although he had hardly interacted with the Security Bureau agents, he was related to these agents. The popularity of the rumors in the army has never been low. The vast majority of regular soldiers have no good impressions of the Security Bureau agents, but they also have to admit that there are many monsters with extremely terrifying power in the Security Bureau. These monster even has the ability to kill real monsters like seeds of corrosion with one hand. And the young man in front of me seems to have been holding the knife with one hand from beginning to end, while the other hand has not even moved. This should be considered a one-handed killing, right? What's more, that woman is much more terrifying than the seed of corrosion. Such people can feel extremely strong pressure just by standing in front of them. Fortunately, they are friends of their own camp, not enemies. The soldier just breathed a sigh of relief when he heard the young man wearing sunglasses and holding a knife say, "It's not dead yet. Take your companions and retreat quickly." What? The soldier was startled and turned to look at the female corpse that had been cut into pieces. Only the cut sections of the corpse could be seen, and countless fine translucent tentacles emerged from the flesh and squirmed. Crawling on the ground, it seems that he is trying to gather the corpses together. It's like Zack, the biochemical demon who was passive. "Withdraw." Asano Akira repeated the word. "Ah, okay," the soldier nodded hastily, used his remaining arm to pick up his companion whose power armor was damaged, and dragged him back. Akira Asano raised his knife, took a deep breath of the smelly air, and pointed the blade towards the squirming corpses. The crawling speed of the tentacles seems to be very slow, but in fact, in just a few seconds, these corpses have been gathered together. It's just that they are not combined in the original order, but as long as there are sections that touch each other, they will immediately stick together. This is like a naughty kid visiting your house and accidentally breaking your little plastic figurine. The other person tried to repair the broken plastic figurine before you got home and pretended that nothing happened. However, the repair method was just to repair it. Every part of the plastic man is covered with a layer of glue and then stuck together haphazardly. As for why the legs grow on the head, the arms are connected to the belly, and the entire waist and hip joints rotate 180 degrees. There are also a bunch of tiny parts, which cannot be explained clearly in just a few words. All in all, what appeared in front of Asano Akira now was such a messed up body parts. The people in the distance were completely stunned. Oh no, they must have been frightened. A few timid people even sat down on the ground. Anyone who sees the appearance of this monster will more or less have some psychological shadow. During this period, it is estimated that many people will have this thing in their nightmares at night. Except Akira Asano. It's not that he can't see the appearance of this monster, but for him, the emotion of fear seems to be extremely weak. He adjusted his breathing slightly on the spot, and then raised his knife to slash at reorganization again. Then woman. If it can be put back together after being cut into several pieces, what will happen if the body is chopped into minced meat? Asano Akira is a very active person. He will do whatever he thinks of immediately. The Nino alloy sword has danced countless after-images in his hands. These after-images are wrapped with the light of the sword that is difficult to catch with the naked eye. Wrapping the monster in it, half a minute later, Asano Akira stopped what he was doing. On the ground, there was a puddle of minced meat that was as pulpy as vomit. But even so, the puddle of minced meat was still not dead. Tiny tentacles and granulation sprouted out of the minced meat like seedlings. Before long, the puddle of minced meat turned into a ball of meat that was constantly oozing blood. Some strange shaped organ slowly grew out, but the limbs were not reborn. Instead, a locomotion organ similar to the abdominal legs of a slug appeared at the bottom of the flesh ball. There seems to be a brand new heart growing inside this meatball. As the heart beats, the fascia on the surface of the meatball also contracts and relaxes rhythmically. What kind of monster is this? The soldier standing about 10 meters behind Asano Akira couldn't help but asked in a trembling voice. This shouldn't be a seed of erosion, right? No, a hoarse female voice asked from the soldier's side. Aya also rushed to the scene. Her prosthetic body had only undergone minimal repairs, and many combat functions had been lost. But as the commander of the evacuation operation, she can't leave this place yet. The remnants of the heretical sect also appeared at Bayonet number 1 and Bayonet 2. One person injected seeds into his body, and another guy inserted a needle into the soldier's neck while the inspecting soldier was not paying attention. There Aya said to Asano Akira, but the luck of those two people was not very good. The seeds were not planted alive, and the container died before even entering the violent period. This one is alive, Asano Akira said solemnly. Yeah, you're so unlucky, Aya complained. Can you handle it? Do you need me to deploy some more support for you? No need. Asano Akira turned his back to her and shook his head. Just evacuate the nearby people as soon as possible. That's right. Aya turned her head and glanced in the direction of Xinxing Chamber of Commerce. I just don't know what the situation is like over Klan. I heard that the big guy is temporarily restrained by the fire extinguishing gel. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 761. Aya did not stay at the number 6 checkpoint for long. After handing the container of the fusion body to Asano Akira, she led a team of Security Bureau agents to evacuate the people. The number 6 checkpoint had become Asano's on the battlefield between Showa and this monster. The people who originally gathered here and lined up had to move to another exit. The perspective shifted to the ruins of the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce building. Klan squatted on the roof of the department store, paying attention to the situation below, with a solemn look on his face. Fusion Plus has really strong adaptability. At first, the fire extinguishing gel hindered its ability to move, but gradually, one after another, sarcoma-like glands bulged under its skin. A large amount of oily substances are secreted from these glands, covering the body surface of the fusion body. This should be the ability of the burrowing sea beasts in the polar seas. This mammal that looks somewhere between a seal and a sea lion on Earth has sharp and hard claws that can quickly dig tunnels in the frozen polar sea ice. Travel freely. Each hair on their body surface is a hollow tube, and the bottom is directly connected to the sebaceous gland, which can secrete a light and thin layer of oil to cover the surface of the hair. This layer of oil will not make the fluffy hair stick together and lose its thermal insulation ability. Instead, it can form a sealing insulation layer to lock the air between the gaps of the hair. In addition to keeping warm, the biggest function of this layer of grease is to act as a lubricant for the burrowing sea beasts when they travel through ice caves. This creature can glide at the fastest speed of more than 75 km per hour in straight horizontal ice caves. Unless the ice caves are blocked or collapsed, predators on the ice sheet will not be able to catch them. For Fusion Plus, this layer of grease is also a very good layer of lubrication. As the grease layer gradually thickens, the gel poured on its body begins to become a little unsightly. The adhesion of fire extinguishing gel is very good, but when faced with an oil film whose friction is so small that it is almost negligible, it is very difficult to stick to it like before. The fire extinguishing gel originally wrapped around the fusion body slipped off one after another. As for the one sprayed on later, it only went through the grease layer on the body surface and quickly merged with the gel pool on the ground. The only thing that gave Klan some comfort was that this layer of grease not only isolated the fire extinguishing gel, but also blocked the spores ejected by the mimic fungus. Using fire extinguishing gel to prevent spore spraying was Klan's original purpose. As for restricting the movement of the fusion body, it was purely an accident. Anyway, at least Klan's initial purpose has been achieved. As for delaying, these 10 minutes are completely wasted time. After getting rid of the shackles of the fire extinguishing gel, the fusion body began to move slowly. Its body was actually an irregular meatball with a diameter of more than 30 meters, relying on multiple pairs of abdominal legs at the bottom and both sides of the body. The auxiliary limbs are used to move. Although the movement is slow, due to the body shape, it can move nearly 10 meters every second, which is still very fast compared to humans. According to its current moving speed, within 10 minutes at most, those checkpoints filled with evacuated people would be included in the attack range of its tentacles. Aya, the situation is not good. Everyone has escaped and is moving in the direction where people are gathering. How much time will it take for you to evacuate all the people? Kaylan asked on the communication channel. A container entering the violent stage appeared at the number 6 checkpoint. Akira Asano is handling it. I am currently busy transferring the people at the number 6 checkpoint to several other exits. Those from several nearby districts can be mobilized. Troops and transport vehicles are already on the way, and there will be at most 40 more. No, give me another 30 minutes, and I can evacuate all these people. As for those who are hiding in the building and refuse to come out people, I can't care about them anymore. Don't worry about those people, since they don't want to believe us, let them bear the consequences themselves, Kaylan said quickly, but I can't give you 30 minutes. The big guy is moving in your direction. You guys have 10 minutes at most. 10 minutes is too little. Even the convoy can't catch up, and many people will die. I also know that many people will die. We are already releasing people as quickly as possible. If we release all the traps, I don't know how many people will die in the stampede. Can you think of another way? Think about it again. I think there is a way. Kaylan looked up at the battleship suspended in the sky. He could order the plasma cannon to kill this big guy at any time, but the price of doing so would be but it allowed the tens of thousands of innocent people left in this economic development zone who had not evacuated to be buried with it. The people on the battleship obviously also noticed that the fire extinguishing gel could no longer restrict the fusion body's movements, and began to ask Kaylan whether he needed to carry out some lethal strikes that would not affect the evacuated people. For example, small missiles, cluster laser weapons and the like. Forget it, Kaylan rejected the proposal. Try not to use attacks to stimulate this monster. You have also seen that this guy's adaptive evolution ability is too abnormal. He has evolved in such a short time. There are oil glands that can break free of the gel. Cluster lasers and small missiles can't kill it. What's the old saying? What doesn't kill me only makes me stronger. What if after being bombarded by you like this thing evolves into something like heat insulating armor, anti-beam coating, etc. By then, you still dare to guarantee that the plasma cannon can hit it with one shot? Kill. This fusion plus is essentially similar to the Leviathan that was resurrected by the red flesh worm. At that time, the first cruise fleet actually had many combat plans, but the fleet commander still made the decision without hesitation. The decision to sacrifice oneself and the flagship was to achieve a one-hit kill to prevent Leviathan from constantly learning, evolving, and growing during the long battle. Hitting the King Bomb right from the start is actually not a joke, but a tactic, a mature, excellent and effective tactic. To fight a lion against a rabbit, you need all your strength. In many novels, if the villain could directly use thunder to destroy the protagonist before he has grown up, then there wouldn't be so many things later. He has to be dispatched again and again. Characters who are 1 or 2 levels higher than the protagonist can give heads, resources, and experience to the protagonist. By the time the protagonist reaches a higher level, it is already too late to shout so scary. If Kaylan were to be the villain, even if the opponent was just a little shrimp in the chi refining stage, as long as this guy showed even a hint of the protagonist's temperament, he would directly send a yuanying old monster to kill this little shrimp, even at the expense of end it in person. Now that the idea of this son can't be kept has arisen, this determination to break must be resolutely implemented, either not to offend him, or to destroy his bones and ashes, not even letting his soul go. Kaylan even feels that he can write an online novel about this villain is too steady. Then we are just going to watch like this. The contact person on the battleship side was a little stunned, but if we don't take measures to organize it, what will happen to the people who are evacuating? The battleship was suspended in the sky above the block. They could see the situation in the entire block more clearly than Kaylan. Naturally, they knew that it was absolutely impossible for all the tens of thousands of people to move away before the fusion moved to the evacuation area. It would be nice to be able to evacuate 1/5 of them, without transport. they couldn't get very far at all. As the fusion body moves, there is another problem that has to be faced, that is, the bombardment position of the plasma cannon must also change accordingly. The plasma cannon must directly hit the fusion body to destroy it, but if the bombardment position moves with the fusion body, the scope of the aftermath will naturally move with it. These men had to travel farther to avoid the aftermath of the bombardment and the deadly heat. "Why haven't you come yet?" Kaylan raised his head and searched this small airspace with his eyes. "What hasn't come yet?" Aya couldn't help but ask. "I called for special support 10 minutes ago. According to the efficiency of the crisis management department, people should have been sent to me by now." Kaylan scratched the top of his head and muttered. "Crisis management department? Do they have a way to stop this big guy?" "Wait, you said sending people to, who are you talking about?" Aya asked doubtfully. "It's just a fool," Kaylan replied, "but whether it's useful or not, I can't guarantee it. He's here." He looked at the sky and narrowed his eyes. "I saw a high-speed fighter jet passing over the entire neighborhood." In this brief moment, a black dot fell from the fighter jet. It quickly enlarged as it fell until it turned into a black sphere with a diameter of more than 5 meters. The landing point of the black sphere happened to be on the top floor of the department store where Kaylan was located. When the sphere was about to hit the building, it strangely solidified in mid-air. The next second, all the black matter on the surface of the sphere moved inward. It turned into a tube-top black little dress. The black fabric has a satin-like texture, forming a very obvious visual contrast with the snow-white skin color of the person wearing it. The skirt of the dress just covered her thighs, revealing 2 round knees and graceful calves. Further down, there was a pair of black patent leather high heels, which added a bit of mature femininity to the stunning girl in front of Kaylan. A unique sense of charm. The one whose skin color is paler than the girl's is a head of long white hair flowing down from her shoulders like a waterfall. Ever since Kaylan joined the Undead Crew Club, there is no need to hide ZE Logo's true identity. In fact, ZE Logo's the existence of the Undead Crew has long been known. After that, ZE Logo changed her hair color back to the white color when Kaylan first saw her, and the pupils of her eyes turned red. This red color is different from ordinary cosmetic contact lenses. It looks as eye-catching as 2 bright rubies. Although Kaylan protested about this, ZE Logo rejected it on the grounds that "I just like this," and also asked Kaylan whether it was because this look caused an XP critical hit to him, so he provoking protests. Kaylan didn't know what kind of random books this guy read when he had nothing to do. Finally here Kaylan sighed, "If you don't come, I will have to pick you up in person." "Then I would have known that I was delaying time on purpose," ZE Logo said, an arrogant line with a 3-0 expression. The next second, he appeared next to Kaylan and naturally hugged Ian's arm. There seemed to be nothing wrong with this slightly intimate gesture, but Kaylan pulled out his arm with a look of disgust. "There are so many empty ships in the sky watching. I don't want people to misunderstand that I am smelting copper. My current physical appearance is about 16 to 18 years old, not counting copper smelting," ZE Logo said expressionlessly. "I doubt if you keep a poker face all day long, it's because you know that I particularly like those 3 no girls in anime, right?" Kaylan asked. "If you want to understand it that way, that's fine," ZE Logo nodded, her slender white hair gently brushing her small and exquisite chin. "Then you should also know that Sanwoo girls are usually iceberg beauties, so they wouldn't take the initiative to stick to them, right? The weather is good today." ZE Logo raised his head, looked at the unchanged lead gray clouds above, and said lightly. "Okay, let's get down to business first." Kaylan pointed to the Fusion Plus moving along the street below and asked, "Can you stop this guy?" "You don't need to kill it, just hold it for 30 minutes. In addition, try not to use attack methods that may induce evolution or mutation. The growth potential of this thing is not an ordinary perversion." "Huh?" ZE Logo tilted his head and looked at Kaylan. Before she came, Kaylan had no free time to give her detailed information about this monster. She only knew that it was a monster formed by the fusion of two water and fire incompatible creatures, the erosion seed and the flesh-eating worm. No other information is known. As for the books and documents she usually reads, there are no records of such creatures as fusions. The fusion body can absorb the genes of the prey it eats and replicate the prey's flesh, but this big guy has eaten too many things. Its body is like a large and diverse gene pool. No matter what situation you encounter, you can use this gene pool to find a coping strategy and prompt your body to rapidly evolve in this direction. Do you understand what I mean? Oh, I understand, Ze Logo responded. Also, these genes are definitely not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2, different genomes edited together may also cause unexpected mutations. In short, I won't feel anything happening to this guy. Weird, you have to pay extra attention to this. P.S. Thanks to book friend 20220325152150357 for the 500 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 762. Just show them off as soon as you see them, Ze Logo said calmly. One more thing. For a moment, Kaylan felt like a nagging old woman. This big guy can fuse the genes of other creatures through eating, as well as any scraps torn from the enemy. The component, it just swallowed up a little bit of hair and skin flakes stuck on my coat, and it reproduced the ability similar to a living armor. Although this reproduction is not complete, but... He did not continue, but Ze Logo already understood what Kaylan meant. If even Ze Logo's abilities were copied by this fusion plus, it would be difficult to find anyone on this arc who could kill it something. You can rest assured on this issue. Ze Logo raised a bright wrist like gelatin. The next second, the fair skin was stained with a layer of iron gray, and even had a trace of the unique texture of metal. You said that this monster can promote its own evolution by fusing the genes of other creatures, but I can be a living thing, an inorganic substance or something else. Ze Logo continued to say to Kaylan, this it depends on my thoughts. As long as I want to, even if it swallows me whole, it won't be able to get any genetic material from it. Swallow the whole person. Kaylan couldn't help but think of the Monkey King who made a fuss in Princess Iron Fan's body for 300 rounds, if Ze Logo was allowed to get into the belly of the fusion. Forget it, Kaylan shook his head slightly to get this somewhat outrageous idea out of his mind. The current situation is still focused on stability. As long as Ze Logo can drag the people in the economic development zone to complete the evacuation, the plasma main gun of the Starfire cruiser can easily kill the fusion body. In this process, any extraneous operations may become a variable and an unstable factor that affects the entire combat plan. Okay, you just need to hold this guy down. Pay attention to safety. Kaylan subconsciously wanted to pat Ze Logo's shoulder, but when his eyes fell on the round and delicate shoulders and the beautiful clavicle socket on the front, the hand that was raised in the air suddenly froze again. This action was okay between brothers, but it seemed not very suitable for a girl wearing a tube-top dress. But just when Kaylan was hesitating to take his hand back, the surrounding space was slightly distorted. He forcibly wrapped and dragged his palm to move to Ze Logo's head, and gently rubbed it. One time. Ze Logo's hair was very slender and soft, with a slight warmth from the top of her head and heart. Although Kaylan was a little shocked, he had to admit, it felt really good. Touch your head, where did you learn this? The shackles of space finally disappeared, and Kaylan quickly withdrew his hand. Slave Girl 11xy, Ze Logo said calmly. How should I put it? Although such a contrasting and cute behavior with the expression of a 3-no girl is indeed very lethal. Wait a minute, what did this guy just say? Slave Girl 11 sway. Where did you find this old era, ahem, classic minigame? Kaylan looked at Ze Logo speechlessly and asked. On your personal hard drive. Oh, It turns out you got the resources from me, so that's okay. If you touch your head too much, you will become bald, Kaylan said seriously. I won't be bald, Lugo said, I just like this feeling. Then you can control the stasis of space. Next time you can solidify the space above your head into the shape of your palm and touch yourself. Kaylan finished the first half of the sentence and lowered his voice slightly. If you do this, they'll think of me as a pervert. Do you care what other people think? Of course, I don't want the society to die. But aren't the members of the Immortal Crew Association the ones with the highest level of power in human society? If someone has an objection to you, just let him disappear. Lugo, I remember I told you many times, Kaylan suddenly said seriously, different from the previous false seriousness. At this time, his whole body tensed up, and his eyes stared at Lugo. Lugo, you still remember what you promised me, right? If you want me to integrate you into human society, then treat yourself as a human being and abide by the rules of human society. No one can take it away at will the lives of others. But Lugo replied equally seriously, the rules of human society are made for people without power. The greater the power in your hand, the less binding the rules are on him, and you are the one who makes the rules, not the one who is shackled by the rules. Not only the undead crew will do this, but the people in power throughout history have always done this. Forget it, now is not the time to argue with you about this, Kaylan sighed, let's solve the immediate trouble first. Yes, Lugo nodded. The little black dress on her body suddenly gathered up and turned into a tight-fitting combat uniform that perfectly conformed to the curves of her body. Her waist-length white hair suddenly became neat and ear-length. He has short hair, and a metal mask with hard edges and industrial machinery style rises from his collar, covering his impeccable face. The built-in character editor is really enviable. Kaylan glanced at Lugo's back with some envy, and a very cruel thought suddenly came to his mind, whether it was the little dress just now or now this tights, which looks like an EVA driving suit, is actually not a real piece of clothing, but a part of Lugo's body. In other words, from a certain angle, she now looks like the kind of person who wears body paint. The clothes are just like those of models on the street, but they are actually not wearing anything. I just don't know what it would be like to wear this kind of tight-fitting combat uniform on the eldest lady. At this moment, 113 blocks away, Miss Soma sneezed again in the office on the top floor of the Silver Building. Lugo had already reached the edge of the rooftop in a few steps, looking down at the Fusion Plus moving in the middle of the street below. He spread his arms flat, leaned forward, and fell to the ground freely. The moment she fell, the fusion body had already sensed her presence, and hundreds of tentacles suddenly shot out, attacking Lugo in mid-air. When these tentacles were still nearly 20 meters away from Lugo, the front ends began to produce glands for spinning silk one after another. The dense white spider silk weaved into a large web with a diameter of more than 100 meters. Waiting for the falling girl to throw herself into the trap. Kaylan had already experienced the strength and toughness of these spider silks in the basement of Xinxing Chamber of Commerce. Not to mention a weak girl weighing less than 50 kilograms, even if it was Dio Brando pushing 20, even a ton heavy roller cannot break through this large net. But at the moment Lugo fell into the big net, Kaylan only heard a stab sound, and a huge hole appeared without warning in the extremely strong big net, and Lugo was not even a finger moved. No matter how tough the spider silk is, it can't beat the cracked space. Kaylan stared at the battlefield below, and his time-stop ability divided the changes that occurred in just a few seconds into hundreds of frames. He could even clearly see the process of the liquid ejected from the glands condensing into spider silk in the air. In the next frame, these spider threads, which are as thick as a little finger, are intertwined to form a dense web with meshes the size of a fist, but in the next frame, this web is torn apart. No, it shouldn't be said to be torn, but to be cut. The cut of the spider silk is smooth and flat. Even laser cutting cannot have such smoothness, and there is no trace of stress on the edge of the section, as if it was originally it's broken. In the blink of an eye, Ze Lugo had passed through the big net and landed lightly on the fusion body. When her feet came into contact with the fusion body, the latter suddenly looked like a cat with exploding hair, with countless tentacles and limbs. The attack organs of various creatures were raised at the same time, overwhelmingly rushing towards Ze Lugo. But they all hit a barrier that was invisible to the naked eye. No matter how they hit, whipped, or bit, they couldn't break through this barrier. Just trap it here, right? Ze Lugo's voice sounded in Ian's ears. Yes, Lan nodded, even though there was nearly 100 meters between the two of them, and Ze Lugo's eyes did not turn towards Lan. Lan knew that any of her slightest movements would be noticed by her. Can see. Lan suddenly felt that even if Ze Lugo killed the fusion, it wouldn't be too difficult for her. Although the ability of the fusion was terrifying, at least it could be done using biological theories. Explanation, and the existence of Ze Lugo is enough to overturn the basic understanding of the world established by countless scientists over thousands of years. In the past, when I read science fiction themed works, there was a very classic joke called quantum mechanics can't decide when things happen, but Ze Lugo's ability can only be explained by quantum mechanics. It's just that even now, human research on quantum mechanics is still in its infancy, let alone traveling through time and space. It can't even dismantle the space transmission device left behind by the Alpha civilization. Lan couldn't help but feel a sense of powerlessness in his heart. A civilization like human beings, to him, is probably really an ant-like existence, right? Although the Alpha civilization looks much stronger than humans, in the eyes of he, the difference between the two civilizations is probably bugs and slightly larger bugs, and this group of Alpha people actually tried to intervene between the gods. During the war, Lan didn't know whether to laugh at their overestimation or admire their great ideals. Ze Lugo raised his hand, and an invisible cage trapped the fusion body plus in it. Although Ze Lugo's ability was very impressive, it also had limits. This was already her ultimate range of action. If the fusion was as big as the one in the Abyss hatchery, even she wouldn't be able to imprison it. Of course, confinement cannot stop it, but with Ze Lugo's ability, he should be able to cut that big octopus into octopus sashimi. Fusion Plus once again used its bone organ that looked like a big dick. Ah no, it was a battering ram-like bone organ, violently hitting this invisible cage time and time again. The frequency of impacts is becoming more and more frequent, and the force is becoming more and more terrifying. In just 30 seconds, the impact frequency of the battery ram has increased to more than 20 times per second, and its single impact force is enough to instantly blow up the department store building at Ian's feet. But the invisible barrier didn't move at all. It didn't even give any feedback that could be captured by human sensory organs. There were no sounds, vibrations, smoke, cracks, none of these. Only the inside of the battering ram continued to make a heartbreaking crunching sound, and the broken bone fragments from the front end of the battering ram fell down like snow. Lan suddenly wanted to dub voices for both the fusion body and Ze Lugo. Eula ola 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 dash. Would big. Ze Lugo, how long will it take to break this spatial cage of yours? Lan asked. If it doesn't evolve in the direction of space capabilities, it will never be able to break this cage, Ze Lugo replied, but maintaining this space cage consumes a lot of money on me. I can only last for 72 hours at most. 72 hours, is more than enough. Lan turned to the communication channel of the three-person team at the beginning and said to Aya, how long will it take until the evacuation operation is completed? 25 minutes, give me another 25 minutes, and I can transport all these tens of thousands of people to a place 10 kilometers away from this economic development zone. Okay, I'll give you another 25 minutes. Lan had no intention of giving Aya and the others a more tolerant time limit. The sooner it was resolved, the smaller the variables would be in the process. Although Ze-Lugo could control this monster for up to 72 hours, he did not dare to guarantee whether the monster would really evolve spatial abilities during these 72 hours. 25 minutes later. Evacuation completed. When Aya's voice sounded on the communication channel, Kaylan finally let out a sigh of relief and looked up at the Starfire cruiser, which had been on standby for a long time. Ze-Lugo, you can withdraw now. As soon as he finished speaking, the girl flashed to Kayan's side, and the invisible barrier unfolded again, surrounding the two of them. Starfire, follow my orders, lock the target, prepare dash. Fire. PS attached is the full version of the quantum mechanics jingle, undecided, quantum mechanics, style jumping, virtual world, incomprehensible explanation, traveling through time and space, not understanding color matching, cyberpunk, not enough imagination, parallel universe, old-fashioned picture, pursuit retro, unclear, tribute to Thulhu alien relic hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 763. First, a turquoise guidance laser fell straight from the sky and locked the target's position. Then, a ball of blue plasma was ejected from the huge muzzle with a diameter of more than 5 meters. Under the constraints of the strong magnetic field, it turned into a high-speed flying cannonball and hit the fusion body below. The Starfire cruiser hovered at a very low altitude, and the plasma cannon hit the target almost immediately after being discharged. The intense white light like a supernova explosion instantly filled the entire street. If it weren't for Ze-Lugo's space, if the barrier isolates the space between the two people from the outside world, Kaylan standing on the roof of the building may be vaporized by the high temperature of hundreds of thousands of degrees Celsius in an instant. Even the Starfire's own armor could not withstand such high temperatures. After firing the plasma cannon, it immediately turned on the energy shield and quickly pulled the ship's body up. The white light lasted for about 10 seconds. After the surrounding vision returned to normal, everything completely changed. A small half of the city block was evaporated, leaving behind a large hemispherical crater with a diameter of about 1 kilometer. Through this crater, one could even directly see the sandwich structure and part of the skeleton of the Ark's hull. As for the fusion at the center of the bombardment, as for the body, not even a bit of dregs remains. The metal fuses on the edge of the pit are still emitting orange-red light. Everything on the ground made of materials that are not resistant to high temperatures has either evaporated or been burned. The concrete structure of the building burst into powder, and even the internal supporting steel bars have become the soft bend caused all the buildings in the economic development zone to collapse. In this case, unless they were hiding in a safe house that could withstand a nuclear explosion, everyone who stayed in this economic development zone would probably have died. Except Kaylan and Ze-Lugo. Of course, whether the two of them can still be considered human now, remains to be discussed. The department store building at Kayan's feet has long since disappeared. It is less than 100 meters away from the center of the bombardment. Whether it is concrete or metal, it has been sublimated the moment the plasma cannon exploded. At present, human beings none of the physical materials used can withstand such high temperatures, not even nano-alloy. Ze-Lugo took Kaylan and floated to a ruins about 500 meters away from the edge of the pit. According to the temperature measurement device that comes with the smart glasses, it can be known that the ground temperature here is still around 700 degrees Celsius, although the alloy foundation will not melt, but the asphalt pavement laid on it will evaporate completely. Note: asphalt has no fixed boiling point according to the information I collected on the internet. It is between 200 degrees Celsius and 500 degrees Celsius. The temperature of the nearby land is heated to more than 1000 degrees Celsius in an instant, so it is paved on the road. The asphalt will most likely have evaporated before it can spontaneously combust. As for the artificial stone bricks laid on the sidewalk, they have been reduced to powdered raw materials. A little further away, thick smoke rising from the fire could be seen everywhere. The garrison's aircraft had entered these neighborhoods and began to spray fire-extinguishing foam and gel downwards from the air. As for ground personnel, Due to the temperature and toxic gases, they are not yet able to enter these blocks for rescue operations. Protective suits that can withstand high temperatures and are equipped with a complete gas circulation device are not available everywhere. The nearest fire department only has less than 30 units in stock. For the entire economic development zone, this number, the idiom "a drop in the bucket," cannot be more appropriate to describe it. But then again, in this case, there is actually nothing to save, the people left inside must be dead. As for the property left inside, it can be destroyed in a few seconds after the cannon is fired. The interior was almost completely destroyed. As for what was not destroyed, this small fire could only be regarded as scratching the itch compared to the high-energy moment of just a few seconds. Hiss, hiss. It took nearly 10 minutes for the magnetic field interference caused by the plasma explosion to disappear. As soon as the communication was restored, Aya's voice came from the earphones. "Is it successful?" "Well, that big guy was bombarded to the point where there was nothing left," Kaylan said, "but the economic losses caused were also huge. It is estimated that a lot of companies will go bankrupt because of this." "For these unlucky guys," said, "this is really an unforeseen disaster. Although the ARC official will compensate the companies and individuals whose assets were lost in this incident afterwards, the long and complicated investigation, statistics, and accounting work are estimated to take several months, plus it is such a special period now. Even if the compensation plan is finalized, it will probably take a long time to actually issue the compensation. For these companies that have almost lost all their fixed assets, the capital chain is broken, the production materials are lost, and they are unable to resume work and production in a short time. It was directly sentenced to death. Especially for companies that rely on commercial loans to maintain operations, heavy debt alone is enough to crush them. As for ARC's official compensation, being able to get it within 1 year is considered surprisingly efficient. Water from afar cannot quench local thirst, especially not long after the Alexander disaster occurred and the resources of the whole society were highly strained. These companies could only admit that they were unlucky. The only thing ARC officials need to pay attention to is whether someone will do something too extreme because they are desperate. After all, when people are in extremely desperate situations, it is easy to anger some innocent people or things. But if we really want to investigate, the cause of this incident must be traced back to the mole of the Undead Crew Association, but regardless of whether the mole has been found out, ARC's officials will not admit this level of relationship. From the perspective of the people, the main responsibility must be borne by these remnants of the heretical sect headed by the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce. As the direct perpetrators, they are not unjustly blamed for taking the blame. It is a pity. Almost all of these remnants of the heretical sect died in the headquarters building of the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce. The few guys who were able to escape from the Men in Black were also seized by the Security Bureau agents and the garrison when passing through the checkpoint, and were shot to death on the spot. Even there was no chance for them to be tried or convicted. As for the 2 captured instructors, they were buried in the ruins when the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce building collapsed. Whether they were eaten by the fusion body or died in the bombardment of the plasma cannon, they would not suffer any harm. Despite the pain of curse and torture, Kaylan didn't break his promise. "Is that matter over?" Aya deliberately lowered her voice on the other end of the communicator. "The crew will be over there." "For you, this matter is over," Kaylan said to Aya. "As for the Immortal Crew Association, it is another matter, and you cannot intervene. I know that with our level, we can't get involved in a game of this level." Aya lowered her voice a little lower, "But if there is a need to use us, I won't refuse. Even if I cannot mobilize the power of the Security Bureau, I will also use my personal capacity." "Don't rush to take sides yet," Kaylan interrupted her. "The crew knows how to handle this matter." "Well, how should I put it? It's very complicated. You just need to pretend that you don't know anything." Okay, Aya's answer seemed a little lonely and unwilling. "By the way, Ms. Ayabrita, there is something I want to confirm. Kaylan suddenly changed his tone. What's up? Are you working for the Immortal Crew Association, or are you working for the humans on this ship? The other end of the communicator was silent for a few seconds before Aya's firm voice came through, for humanity. Okay, then I'm relieved. Kaylan curled up the corner of his mouth and exited the communication channel. In the central core area, there is a dedicated conference hall for the Undead Crew Association. As the initiator of the vote, Kaylan expressionlessly glanced at the virtual projections sitting on both sides of the long table. One after another, red or green light beams lit up. Finally, at the end of the long table, the empty main on the spot, a red light beam lit up for the last time. 10 votes are in favor and 10 votes are against. If the votes are equal, the result is invalid and the proposal is not passed. Compared to the last time when the red light beam lit up at this location, everyone in the crew was surprised. This time everyone was much calmer, and it seemed that they had already expected this result. Chiron, the time of every member of the crew is very precious. Zeus, the fourth seat king, said impatiently, the exact same vote was just conducted not long ago. I think it's a waste of our time. Don't you spend most of your time sleeping in the coffin of eternal life? Kaylan was completely unafraid that the other party was much older than him, and openly challenged him. Besides, this time the content of the vote is not exactly the same as last time. Yes, this time, Kaylan really added the condition except for the Zeroth seat of the fool to the proposal as he joked last time, but the mysterious fool still voted against it. This is obviously the first good opportunity to obtain other people's information for free, right? Why should he refuse? According to Ian's last metaphor, it is equivalent to publicizing the private property of everyone except the world's richest man. The biggest beneficiary of this is not the absolutely poor Kaylan, but the fool who still retains the most huge private wealth. People do not suffer from scarcity but from inequality. The existence of fools is the biggest disparity. Kaylan thought for a while and listed 3 possibilities. The first type is that the fool is a member of the inner ghost. Although his secret will not be exposed, his accomplices are likely to be bitten by him. In order to protect his associates, he must vote against it. This possibility is the most direct and logically explainable, but for some reason, Kaylan always feels that this possibility is the lowest. Just like when doing multiple choice questions, many people subconsciously feel that the shortest and easiest option is often not the correct answer. The second type is that the fool is a stubborn conservative. He wants to maintain the status quo and does not want the members of the undead crew to break with each other. Although there are insiders, he will not take any radical measures as long as the balance of power between the two parties is maintained. Measure. Kaylan felt that if the content and nature of the vote and the camps of both parties were exchanged, the fool would still cast his vote for the camp with only 9 votes. Kaylan and the others want to change, but the fool doesn't want the situation to change. Some people say that remaining unchanged in response to all changes is a manifestation of great foolishness and wisdom, but in Ian's view, maintaining stability is equivalent to chronic suicide. This time it was the basement of the Xinxing Chamber of Commerce, but where would it be next time? Pan is already dead, and there is no way to find out who did it, so, who will die next? The fool doesn't want to change the current situation, but the moles obviously don't think so. They are already taking action for their own purposes. If the current stable situation is broken by them, it will be too late. It is impossible for a fool not to understand this truth. Then there is only the third possibility. Ian's purpose in initiating this proposal is to reveal the secrets of everyone except the fool, so that they no longer have secrets to speak of, but maybe for the fool, the undead crew there are no secrets for other members. He knows everything. He also knows exactly who the mole is and what the mole's purpose is. He didn't need to vote to know these things. In order to prevent conflicts among the crew members from quickly intensifying, he voted against it. Then, does he have his own plan? Kaylan was still staring at the empty seat at the end of the long table, when Zeus said with an angry voice beside him, "Watch the attitude of your words, Chiron. Not long ago, you were just a person who couldn't control yourself. The chess piece that determines life and death, we gave you the opportunity to become the chess player. Oh, you know it was not long ago. But now I am a member of the Immortal Crew Association. According to the rules of the Crew Association, we should be completely equal, right?" Kaylan glanced, pretending to be contemptuous. Zeus glanced at him and said, "Also, I remember that you should have voted against the decision for me to join the undead crew, right? You didn't give me the opportunity. I really don't know how you could be so shy about counting yourself to us. Kaylan was in a bad mood now, so when Zeus jumped out, he decided to give him a hard slap on this guy who had never given him a good look since he joined the crew. Even if Zeus decided to impeach himself because he was angry, the result of the vote would most likely be equal, since the fool did not interfere in his joining the crew meeting. He would not have offended a crew member because of his language. Kick yourself out as a member.